All right, so the first domain that we're going to go through here is this intro to ethical hacking, and this one's just a pretty straightforward kind of first chapter, the preface, if you will, to just about everything that we're going to get into. And it just, at a high level, really gets us into a lot of the key terminology that you're going to be going through and doing that. But this is one of the highly revered certifications in our industry. I would say that it's probably a little bit more appreciated or revered than Security Plus, but not quite as Miggity Mac Daddy as the CISSP. So CISSP still is the trump card. CISM, we're starting to see more of management get the CISM. So that I know that I see some jobs out there for management and technical, but this is one of the ones that people are scared of because CEH is typically revered as pretty technical. So when we talk about this, there's going to be a lot of different things that we're going to go through and enumerate. We're going to talk a lot about terms. And really that is probably going to be about 60% of this test here is going to be you memorizing the terms or ports, maybe flags, those types of things. But then also we're going to go through and play with some pretty neat tools, some pretty cool virtual machines. But the important thing on the CEH, the actual exam, is it's all multiple choice. So you're not going to actually go through and configure the switch. You're not going to go in and have to get into machine, which, in my opinion, sucks. Right? I mean, if you're going to be a certified ethical hacker, you should prove that you can get into systems instead of just a multiple choice exam. So maybe in the coming years they may actually improve that a little bit. But for now, this is the way it's going to work. So we'll get into some of the different triads that we see here with the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And then there's another one here. This is the security, functionality, and usability triangle. That's pretty cool. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. But just about every day, we hear something happening where somebody's getting hacked or owned. And specifically for us, we saw, recently the Ashley Madison, which I'm just going to be naive here and tell you that I didn't even know that website existed. And I've been married for 12 years now, and I didn't even know that website existed. But I can tell you that things like that are out there, and it was kind of serves you right kind of thing when I heard about that. But I mean, if you keep going back and back and back, probably the biggest one that we've seen to date, as far as I'm concerned, is the OPM hack that happened about 3 months ago. And heads are beginning to roll, but I mean, that's not going to make up for our life now being out in somebody else's hand, as far as a clear federal contractor. So that just stinks. But when we start to get into a lot of these conversations, if there's something that you're thinking about that relates back to one of these key topics that we're going to get into, definitely speak up, let us know, and let's talk about it because it's pretty important. And we're gonna talk about these key terms, but this one that I'm gonna focus on right now. The types of data that's stolen from the organizations would be one, and then the second one would be the triad here. So what kind of data do we usually hear about getting stolen from the companies that are out there? Usually credit card information is the number one, or financial data is the number one element that is stolen from organizations, because typically the attackers are looking to try to get some sort of monetary value out of that. They also go after PII, and I'm sure by now, if you've done your annual security training, you're probably in the same boat I am. As far as PII, PHI, we know very well what that is now. Personal health care information being the PHI. But things like SSN, date of birth, first name, last name, address, anything that can be coupled with another element to gain more intelligence about a person will be considered PII, which is kind of just about everything that's in and around us. And when we get into social engineering, I actually have a lab that we're going to do on each other. That you'll see that we all got data out there that we probably need to remove somehow. And then that's just a neat little exercise. But this triad's kind of interesting here. This triangle that you see, the security, functionality, and usability. And the way that it works is if you just kind of put each one of them on the apex of the triangle or one of the angles of the triangle, if you spend too much time with one, then the other ones end up getting neglected. If you make it too secure, then you're going to lose functionality and you're going to lose usability. If you go towards usability, you're probably going to lose security and maybe a little bit of functionality. So usually what we say is to try to keep it in the middle, or maybe just lean a little bit towards one way or another. If you're used to any of the Goldmaster images that are out there, they lean totally towards security, so anything you install doesn't work right off the get-go. So it's err on the side of caution. That's not usually functional in the real world. So you have to make some exceptions. We put in requests for exceptions to be made, and then after that, we can start to make our magic happen. So we're going to get into a few other topics here. And let me just pose this one question to you guys right off the get-go and open it up for discussion. How much is, as a business, how much is your reputation worth? How much is your reputation worth? And I think about, from my perspective, last year, so it was probably last December 2014 timeframe, where I was in Target up here on Research Park, and buying some last minute Christmas stuff for the kids, and I'm thinking to myself, getting up to the line and looking and getting my wallet out, I'm like, should I pay by credit card here? Or no, maybe I'll just go ahead and pay by cash. Because at or around that time, they had just been whacked. And I thought to myself, I don't trust them anymore. And from that perspective, CISO or CIO ended up resigning because in that particular case, that was the first time they had been attacked like that, or a hack that they knew of. But in that particular case, what would an $80,000 penetration test to a huge corporation like that every quarter, even if it was $320K a year, as opposed to losing that many customers' data, how much benefit would that have been to them? Because at least they would have said, hey, you know what, we were trying to do our due diligence, but they weren't. And so what does that effect have on these guys? It's big. It's big. What do you guys think about that? Anybody got any comments?
I agree, but also for us as professionals, integrity is, if your integrity is gone, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I got a good story about integrity whenever we get into that. Hacking for a cause, one of the questions that you'll see on the exam is hacktivism. You will actually see that on the exam. So make note of that there would be a need to know what hacktivism is, and really that's hacking for a cause. And it doesn't matter what the cause is, as long as you know that it's for a cause. I mean, you could be for PETA, or it could be for whatever, freedom of speech. If you're doing something to make a statement, and as a president of a nonprofit here in town, we oftentimes team up with other nonprofits to do a joint meeting. And there was a recent event that happened where that organization that we teamed up with, actually their website was defaced. And it was a hacktivist that was out there, which was kind of interesting because now it's just embarrassing for whether it's a nonprofit or we're an organization. It's just absolutely embarrassing. But one of the cool things here is to think about is, who is this guy? Who is the hacker? Who is that person? Traditionally, what do you think? It's the guy with the hood on over in the corner that you can't see. He's kind of dark off, maybe in a little cave or something.
13-year-old kid with no girlfriend.
13-year-old kid with no girlfriend, yeah. I mean, absolutely. It could be that kid. It could be the businessman sitting over in the corner with a little alpha antenna at Starbucks, watching all network traffic come through. Maybe has a man in the middle with an evil twin going on. And we'll go through some of that, the different types of people to look for and what you can expect if you don't already know. One of the key things to think about are these phases in CEH. And these will be on the exam. So I would make a note, because what they'll probably have is on your exam, they'll have a question that will want you to tell them the sorted order. What comes first, what comes last, and you need to know these phases. And the way that we have these phases enumerated in the syllabus for this class is tightly coupled with these phases that you see up on the overhead here. So phase 1 would be a footprinting and reconnaissance. Phase 2 would be a scanning and enumeration. Phase 3 would be, hey, how are you going to be able to get on the system here? What are you going to do? What kind of technique are you going to use to be able to get on the system? And then once you're on, once our cyber ninja finds out that you're on that system and tries to get rid of you, tries to bump you off, how are you going to maintain access to that system? Put a little nastiness on there to maybe remotely dial back home to you to make sure that you have persistent access. And then what are you going to do to make sure that nobody finds out that you specifically were there? How are you going to be clever enough to not leave that footprint, to say that Bendigy was on the system? Is it going to be through spoofing an IP address? Is it going to be using somebody else's network login? It's going to be going in and modifying the audit policy so you can delete the log files. I mean, what is that technique going to be? And we'll go through each and every one of these while we go through it and do this. I think you guys will enjoy it. Bunch of different types of attacks that we're going to be going through, and we'll actually spend a better part of a half day going through each one of these attacks right here. But typically, the biggest one that we see out in the world is this one down here. And think about misconfigurations when we just talk about that briefly. Think about how many times in your career you're the huckleberry that's either been voluntold or you volunteered to maybe install the system. I mean, I know about in my time, especially as a younger man, going through the ranks, thinking to myself, hey, I'm gung-ho, I want to be that guy. You put me in that position. Let me go ahead and install it. And a lot of times, what do we do with things that we don't know how to install or that we're not experts with? Yeah. You Google it, but you're also, what are you doing? Next, just accepting the defaults. And a lot of times, that'll work. But then also, you may be leaving some pretty blatant holes available to somebody that is nefarious in nature. And that's why typically, if you go and just look at the scope of the industry, things like SQL injection, things like cross-site scripting, things like backdoors and vulnerable ports that are open, protocols that are open, just because you may have hired a $40,000 to $60,000 a year person to come in and configure it, when really you needed an expert to come in and do that. And that's nothing against the junior level folks. It's just, maybe you should have used a mid or a senior level folk to come in there and get that thing going up for you. But we'll be talking about these other ones in the time to come, and there's some pretty interesting ones that are out there. So we talked a little bit about the layered approach, and I know over in my 501 course that I teach at UAH, we spend a whole lesson talking about the layers of the onion. Basically, if you think about Fort Knox being the center precious gem that you want to try to protect, or whatever that Fort Knox is for you, then how do you spatially diffuse and put the layers of the onion around that precious gem that you want to try to protect? And that's the defense in depth approach. Usually you'll hear about the layered approach or the defense in depth, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. What kind of skills do ethical hackers have? What do you guys think the skills of an ethical hacker have?
Networking skill.
What's that?
Networking.
Operating system. Scripting. I know that a lot of the students that I have at the academic level, they don't want to know how to code. That's totally foreign for them. And my thing is, hey, don't be the person just pushing a button, be the person making the button. Because if you know how to actually code, you can do just about anything. And there's nothing that's going to get in your way to be able to either do the research or connect the system or to be able to find that needle in the haystack that oftentimes ends up happening in this business right here. All right, so any questions about this quick slide deck that I have right here? If not, then we're going to jump right into the footprint and reconnaissance.